They ordered the $1,800 bottle of wine without glancing at me, assuming my credit card was just an extension of their vanity. For 2 hours, I watched them play the part of wealthy socialites while I sat in silence. When the waiter finally dropped the check, my father pushed it toward me with a smug grin. I did not move. He thought I was being stingy, but I was simply waiting for the moment his world would collapse. My name is Mara Quinn. I am 39 years old, and I have spent the last 2 decades making myself small so my family could feel big. When my mother called me 2 days ago, her voice was pitched at that specific frequency of urgency that usually meant someone was dying or they needed a cosigner. She told me the family needed my presence in Chicago for a celebration. She did not say what we were celebrating, but the implication was that my absence would be a moral failing. So I booked a flight, packed a single suitcase, and arrived at the restaurant in River North exactly on time. The establishment was aggressive in its luxury. Everything was gold, velvet, or white linen, designed to make you feel underdressed even if you were wearing silk. My parents, Gordon and Lynn, were already seated at a prime booth near the window. They looked impeccable. My father wore his tuxedo with the ease of a man who rented it, and my mother was draped in a sequined gown that caught the low light every time she moved. They were busy photographing the bread basket when I approached. "Mara, you made it," my mother said, not rising from her chair. She gestured for me to sit. "We already ordered the appetizers. The lobster here is supposed to be divine." I sat down, placing my clutch on the table. The air smelled of truffle oil and expensive perfume. My father did not ask how my flight was. Instead, he turned his body slightly outward, projecting his voice toward the well-dressed couple at the adjacent table. "My son, Caleb, is being honored at the Business Innovators Gala this week," Gordon announced, his voice booming. A true visionary. He is taking the local market by storm. He paused to take a sip of water, his eyes sliding over me with practiced indifference before addressing his audience again. "My daughter here. Well, she just does normal paperwork, administrative things. Nothing exciting. But someone has to do the boring work." Right. I took a sip of my water. I did not correct him. I did not tell him that my work involved forensic accounting and fraud investigation for multinational corporations. I let the lie sit there because correcting him would only ruin the scene he was directing. My mother signaled the sommelier. She ran her finger down the wine list, bypassing the reasonable options and stopping at a vintage Cabernet. "We will take this one," she told the sommelier. "The $1,800 bottle, tonight, must be worthy." She looked at me then, her eyes hard and bright, and slid the dinner menu in front of me. It was a heavy, leather-bound book without prices. It was a silent command. "Order whatever you like, Mara," she said. "But pick something substantial. Expensive is worth it." For the next hour, they ordered like kings. Wagyu beef, caviar service, truffles shaved over pasta until the plate disappeared. They did not ask if I was hungry. They did not ask if I was happy. At one point, between bites of steak, my father leaned in, lowering his voice just enough to sound conspiratorial. "You still have that platinum card?" "Right. The one with the high limit, I do," I said. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his meal. When the bill finally arrived, it came in a black velvet folder. The waiter placed it in the center of the table. The silence that followed was heavy. My mother busied herself with reapplying lipstick. My father picked up the folder, opened it, glanced at the total, and then slid it across the white tablecloth until it rested against my hand. "You pay," Gordon said, his voice casual, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. "You pay? You are single. You have no one to support. It is the least you can do for the family." I looked at him. I looked at the bill. $4,212. I did not argue. I did not ask why the celebration of Caleb required my money. I simply pulled out my card and handed it to the hovering waiter. Gordon smirked, satisfied that I had once again played my role. But 5 minutes later, the waiter did not return, Instead, a man in a sharp suit walked toward our table. It was the floor manager. He looked uncomfortable. He leaned down, speaking only to me in a hushed tone. "I apologize, Miss Quinn," he said. "The transaction was declined. The system says—" "It says your card has been flagged for suspicious activity." My father frowned, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "What is the holdup?" I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. My cards were never declined. I had an excellent credit score and a fraud alert system that I monitored daily. "Try this one," I said, handing the manager my debit card. This time, it went through. The manager bowed and retreated. My parents returned to their conversation, oblivious to the shift in the air. But as I signed the receipt, my hand remained steady while my mind began to race. A decline for suspicious activity usually meant unusual geographic usage or a maxed-out limit. I had just arrived in Chicago. I had zero balance on that card yesterday. I looked at my parents, laughing over their wine, their faces flushed with the joy of a free meal. They thought this was just about money. They thought they had successfully squeezed me for dinner. But as I watched my father check his phone, a strange, dark realization settled in my chest. This was not just a bill. It was a breadcrumb, and I was going to follow it. I watched my father pour the last of the expensive wine into his glass. He swirled it, admiring the color against the crystal, completely unbothered by the $4,000 receipt I had just signed. It was a scene that took me straight back to Fairhaven, Indiana, a town small enough that everyone knew your business, or at least the version of your business that your parents decided to broadcast. In the Quinn household, reality was always flexible. My parents needed a simple story to tell the neighbors at the country club or the fellow parishioners at church. They needed a narrative that made them look like the architects of success. For as long as I could remember, my brother Caleb was the star of that show. He was the one who stayed close to home, the visionary, the entrepreneur who was always one deal away from making millions. I, on the other hand, was the cautionary tale. I was the one who left Fairhaven at 18 and never moved back. In my father's version of events, I was the daughter who struggled, the one who worked a dull administrative job and could barely make ends meet. It did not matter that I had graduated at the top of my class or that I owned my own condo in the city. My success did not fit their script, so my father simply rewrote it. "Mara likes her paperwork," he would say to his friends with a sympathetic shake of his head. "She is safe there. Not everyone has Caleb's drive." My mother, Lynn, was different. She did not rewrite history for ego. She did it for peace. She was the diplomat of the household, smoothing over the rough edges of my father's narcissism with a smile and a fresh batch of cookies. She prioritized the appearance of a happy family over the existence of one. If keeping the peace meant nodding along while my father diminished me, she would nod. Over the years, I had sent them money. It started with small amounts, a few $100s here and there to cover a medical bill or a car repair. Then it became larger sums. $5,000 for a roof repair, $3,000 for Caleb's failed startup investment. They always cashed the checks immediately, but they never acknowledged them publicly. To the world, they were self-sufficient. To admit they needed my help would destroy the story they had spent 40 years building. I looked at them now across the candlelit table. They were laughing about a vacation they planned to take next summer. They had no idea who I really was. They did not know that Northbridge Integrity Solutions was not a temp agency for file clerks. They did not know that I spent my days tracking down embezzlement schemes and untangling complex financial fraud for Fortune 500 companies. My job required discretion. I lived in the shadows of data, finding the patterns that liars thought they had hidden. I had always told myself that family was off limits. I was a professional skeptic. But at home, I tried to be just a daughter. Family is not a battlefield, I used to tell myself. But tonight, the air felt different. It was not just that they expected me to pay. It was the entitlement. They did not ask, they assumed. They viewed my bank account as an extension of their own, a resource they could tap whenever the performance of their wealthy life required funding. My phone buzzed in my purse, a notification from my bank confirming the large charge on my debit card. I stared at the screen. The flagged credit card bothered me. I was meticulous with my finances. A random security hold was possible, but in my line of work, I did not believe in coincidences. "You are being quiet, Mara," my mother said, finally noticing my silence. "Is the wine not to your liking?" "The wine is fine," I said. "I was just thinking about what Gordon asked, cutting into his steak, about my credit card." I said, keeping my voice even. "It is strange that it was flagged tonight. I have not used it for anything unusual recently." Gordon stopped chewing for a fraction of a second. It was a micro-expression, a tiny freeze that most people would miss. But I had spent 15 years studying the faces of guilty executives. "Technology glitches all the time," he said, waving his fork dismissively. "Do not overthink it." "You always overthink things." I did not respond. I just watched him. Why did my card get flagged on the exact night they decided to run up a $4,000 bill? And why did my father look less surprised than he should have been? The door in my mind that I had kept shut for years was now slightly ajar, and I knew I could not close it again until I saw what was behind it. The cold Chicago wind hit us the moment we stepped out of the steakhouse, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. My father, Gordon, buttoned his coat with an aggressive snap, already moving on to the next item on his mental agenda. He did not say thank you for the $4,000 dinner. He did not acknowledge that I had just saved them from public embarrassment. "Next week, transfer a little extra to your mother," Gordon said, his voice flat and commanding as he signaled for the valet. "Caleb needs to upgrade his wardrobe for the press photos. Appearance is everything in this industry." I looked at him, standing there under the awning, radiating entitlement. My mother, Lynn, looped her arm through mine, giving a squeeze that felt more like a restraint than a hug. "You understand, Mara," she said, her smile tight. "Family has to lift each other up. Caleb is so close to his big break. We all have to pitch in." "Speaking of pitching in," I said, pulling my arm away gently to face her. "Why was my card flagged tonight? The bank usually only does that if there is unusual activity in a location I am not in." Lynn blinked rapidly. Her gaze shifted to the pavement, then to the passing cars, anywhere but my eyes. "Oh, you know how technology is," she said, her voice going up an octave. "It is probably just a system error. Do not be so dramatic." Beside us, Gordon pulled his phone out to check a notification. The screen brightness was turned up high, illuminating his face in a harsh blue light. I glanced down at the device. He had his digital wallet app open. For a split second before he swiped it away, I saw a card listed at the top of his stack. It was a dark blue card with silver lettering. It looked exactly like the one I carried in my wallet, the same issuer, the same premium tier. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice low, "do you have a card on your phone that looks like mine?" Gordon froze. He shoved the phone into his pocket and turned to me with a sneer that twisted his handsome features. "Excuse me," he snapped. "Are you interrogating me now? After I just treated you to a family evening. I paid for the evening," I corrected him. "I am asking if you used my information to put a deposit on something. That would explain the flag. You have a nasty imagination." "Mara," he said, shaking his head as the valet pulled up in their rental car. "Always suspecting your own father. It is insulting. Really, it breaks my heart." He did not deny it. He just attacked me for asking. As they got into the car, my phone buzzed. It was Caleb. I answered, watching my parents drive away into the night. "Hey, just checking in," Caleb said. He sounded tired. "Did the dinner go okay? Mom said they have been stressing out for months about some big payment coming due. I hope they didn't dump it on you." I stood still on the sidewalk. "What payment?" "Caleb, I don't know," he said. They keep saying they are juggling funds. Look, I have to run. Thanks for being there for them. Mara. He hung up. I took a cab back to my hotel, my mind working faster than the city traffic. When I got to my room, I did not turn on the TV. I sat at the small desk, opened my laptop, and logged into my email. There was a new alert from my bank, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. Transaction declined online purchase, vendor luxury event rentals. My stomach tightened. I had never heard of that vendor. I took a breath and navigated to a credit monitoring site. I typed in my social security number, my fingers moving with mechanical precision. I answered the security questions. The report generated in seconds. I stared at the screen. Under the section labeled Open Accounts, there were 2 credit cards I did not recognize. Both had been opened in the last 6 months. The combined balance on them was nearly $30,000. I clicked on the details. The billing address for both cards was not my condo in the city. It was a house in Fairhaven, Indiana, my parents' house. I picked up my phone and called the credit card issuer's fraud department. It was late, but the 24-hour line picked up. I need to inquire about an account opened in my name. I said, I can help with that. The agent said, can you verify the mother's maiden name used on the application I gave them my mother's maiden name? That matches, the agent said cheerfully. And the high school mascot used for the security question, the Tigers. I said, correct. You are fully verified. I hung up the phone and set it gently on the desk. The room was perfectly silent. I did not cry. I did not scream. The grief I expected to feel was absent, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They had not just stolen my money, they had stolen my identity. They had used the intimate details of my life, my mother's name, my high school history to bypass security checks. The dinner tonight was not about them being cheap. It was a test. They wanted to see if I was still the compliant daughter, the one who paid the bill without looking at the details. They wanted to see if I was still asleep. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of the hotel room. Okay, I whispered to myself. If you want to play games, let us play. I did not sleep. Instead, I engaged the kill switch on my financial life. I logged into the 3 major credit bureaus and froze my reports. I changed every password I owned, enabling 2-factor authentication on accounts I had not touched in years. My hands did not shake. I moved with the cold, mechanical precision of a surgeon scrubbing in for a trauma case. To the rest of the world, this was a personal crisis. To me, it was case file number 409. I opened a fresh spreadsheet and began to populate it. Column A, dates. Column B, merchants. Column C, the lies they told to cover the spending. I pulled the physical receipt from dinner out of my purse and smoothed it flat on the desk. $4,212. I snapped a photo of it. Next, I took a screenshot of the text message Gordon had sent earlier. Transfer a little extra to your mother. Then, I downloaded the transaction history from the 2 fraudulent credit cards. Most of it was lifestyle noise. High-end grocers, designer clothing boutiques, spa treatments. But then I saw it. A single line item that made my blood run cold. Payment $7,500. Recipient Fairhaven Grace Community Fund. I knew that fund. It was the charitable arm of the local church where my father served as the treasurer. He loved to brag about how much money he raised for the community, how he was a pillar of generosity. Now I saw the source of his generosity. He was donating money he had stolen from me, using it to buy prestige in the town square. I picked up my phone and dialed Tessa. It was past midnight, but Tessa worked in high-risk fraud prevention for a major bank in New York. She lived in the same time zone as the criminals. She answered on the second ring. Quinn, it is late. You usually only call me when you have a subpoena. I need you to look at a merchant string for me, I said. I am sending you a screenshot. I heard the click of her keyboard as she opened the image. There was a long silence on the line. Mara, Tessa said, her voice dropping. This is a recurring donation setup. But look at the routing number attached to the payment origin. It is bouncing through a third-party processor to mask the source. This has a pattern. Someone is trying very hard to make this look like clean money. It is my father, I said. The words tasted like ash. Do you want me to flag it officially? She asked. If I do, the system will auto-generate a police report. Not yet, I said. I need the full picture first. I hung up and went back to the spreadsheet. I needed to understand the timing. Why did the house of cards almost collapse tonight? I looked at the declined transaction from earlier, the one that had embarrassed them at the restaurant. Luxury event rentals. The amount attempted was $10,000. I cross-referenced the date. The transaction attempt was made this morning. I opened the browser and searched for Business Innovators Gala Chicago. I found the event page. The venue was the Palmer House Hilton. I scrolled down to the vendor list. The exclusive provider for the gala's staging and decor was Luxury Event Rentals. I dug deeper into the metadata of the declined transaction notification in my email junk folder. The billing email address listed for the receipt was not mine. It was Lynn Quinn, home email, com. The picture snapped into focus. They were not just living above their means. They were financing the entire illusion of Caleb's success using my credit rating. The gala, the clothes, the donations that made my father look like a saint. It was all funded by identity theft. They were cannibalizing my future to feed their present. I closed the laptop. The room felt incredibly small. I could have stormed over to their hotel. I could have screamed until the windows rattled. But rage is a sloppy instrument, and I needed a scalpel. I picked up my phone again and searched for a name I had kept in my contacts for emergencies. Nolan Pierce. He was a ruthless litigator who specialized in familial identity theft. He was expensive, aggressive, and entirely devoid of sentimentality. I sent him an email at 2 a.m. Subject consultation request. Priority high. Body. I have evidence of multi-year identity fraud involving immediate family members. The exposure is roughly $50,000. I do not want a settlement. I want a complete forensic separation of assets and legal accountability. I hit send. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. My reflection ghosted against the glass. My father thought he had raised a pushover. My mother thought she had raised a banker. They were both wrong. They had raised an investigator. I am not going to hurt you, I whispered to the city lights, but I am going to make sure you can never use my name to act again. The next 48 hours were a blur of caffeine and blue light. I did not return to the hospital of emotions where my parents wanted me to live. Instead, I retreated into the cold sanctuary of data. I requested the official transaction logs from the credit card issuer, specifically asking for the metadata that accompanied every swipe and click. I cross-referenced digital signatures with the IP addresses used at the time of purchase. The pattern was clumsy but effective. They had used a VPN for some purchases, but for others, they had gotten lazy and used the Wi-Fi at their own home. But the most damning piece of evidence was the delivery address for the physical goods. The designer handbags, the high-end electronics. The cases of wine, none of them were shipped directly to my parents' house. They were all routed to a private mailbox rental center in a strip mall 3 miles from their neighborhood. I rented a car and drove out there on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a dusty, cramped shop that smelled of packing tape and stale coffee. I walked up to the counter, holding a printout of a tracking number from one of the fraudulent orders. "Hi," I said, putting on my best confused daughter face. "I am trying to track down a package for my mother. She said it was delivered here, but she is getting old and forgets things." The man behind the counter squinted at the paper. "Name Lynn Quinn," I said. His face brightened immediately. "Oh, Mrs. Quinn. She is in here all the time. One of our steadiest customers. She usually sends her husband to pick up the heavy stuff. Though, I felt a sharp click in my chest, like a lock tumbling into place. Right. My dad. He actually picks up most of them. Is there any way you could check who signed for the last one just so I can remind him where he put it?" The clerk shrugged and turned his monitor. He pulled up the digital signature log. It was a scribble. Barely legible. "Can't tell from that," he said. "Do you have a camera?" I asked, pointing to the lens in the corner. Just to see who walked out with it, he hesitated, but I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Please, if he lost this package, my mom is going to be devastated. I just need to know he actually got it." He sighed and clicked a few keys. The grainy footage from 3 days ago popped up on the screen. A man walked into the frame. He was wearing a low baseball cap and a heavy coat, but I knew the walk. I knew the way he held his shoulders, tight and defensive. It was Gordon. He signed the pad, tucked a large box under his arm, and walked out. I thanked the clerk and walked back to my car. My hands were steady as I called Nolan Pierce. "I have the proof," I said. IP addresses, a witness who knows them by name, and video footage of my father picking up goods purchased with the stolen identity. "Do not confront them," Nolan said, his voice sharp and immediate. "Listen to me, Mara. If you walk in there and scream at them now, they will destroy the physical evidence. They will claim it was a misunderstanding, or that you gave them permission verbally. They will gaslight you until you doubt your own name. You need to let them hang themselves." I want to scream. I admitted. "Don't," Nolan said. "Silence is your weapon. Let them think the well is still full." I took his advice. For the next 2 days, I played the part of the exhausted corporate drone. When my mother texted asking if I was excited for the gala, I replied with short, tired messages. "So much work, barely sleeping, see you there." I let them believe I was too overwhelmed to notice the money bleeding out of my life. I let them get comfortable. Then, the invitation came. It was a text from Caleb. "Hey, Mara, I know you are busy, but can you come to the venue a little early tomorrow? Mom and Dad are trying to sort out the final payment for the catering and decorations, and they are confused by the digital payment portal. They asked if you could help them handle it." I stared at the phone. They were not confused. They had hit the limit on the fraudulent cards, and now they needed my physical card or my override code to clear the balance for the party they were throwing in Caleb's honor. "Wow," I said to the empty hotel room. "You really have no bottom." I typed back, "Sure, I will be there early to handle everything." I set the phone down and looked at the 2 manila folders on the bed. I had spent the night organizing them. The first folder contained the police report draft, the fraud affidavit, and the cease and desist order Nolan had drawn up. That was for the law. The second folder was thinner. It contained the credit report, the camera stills of Gordon, and a timeline of every lie they had told Caleb to make him believe they were rich. That was for my brother. The gala was going to be a night to remember, just not for the reasons my parents thought. I packed the folders into my bag. I was done being the bank. Tomorrow, I would be the auditor. I sent Caleb a location pin for a coffee shop 3 blocks away from the hotel, specifically choosing a place that was too hipster and too dimly lit for our parents to ever set foot in. I arrived 20 minutes early to secure a booth in the back corner. When Caleb walked in, he looked every inch the rising star my parents claimed he was. He wore a crisp, tailored suit, his hair was perfect, and he carried himself with an easy confidence that I knew had been bought on credit. He sat down opposite me, checking his watch. "I do not have much time." "Mara," he said, signaling a barista for a black coffee. "Mom and Dad are frantic about the setup. They said you were supposed to help them with the payment portal. I will get to that." I said, keeping my hands folded on the table. "But first, I need you to listen to me. I need you to hear everything I am about to say before you react." Caleb sighed, a sound of brotherly exasperation that I had heard 1,000 times. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Is this about the dinner bill? Look, I know Dad can be pushy, but you know how he is. You always get so intense about these things. Why can't you just let them have their moment? Because their moment is being funded by a crime," I said. The noise of the coffee grinder covered the silence that fell between us. Caleb frowned, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "What are you talking about?" I did not offer an explanation. Instead, I slid the manila folder across the scratched wooden table. It was the one I had prepared specifically for him. "Open it," I said. He hesitated, then flipped the cover. The first page was my credit report, with the fraudulent accounts highlighted in yellow. The second page was the still frame from the security camera showing our father signing for a package at the strip mall. The third page was a printout of the deposit for tonight's gala paid for by a card issued in my name, linked to an email address that belonged to our mother. Caleb stared at the documents. He picked up the photo of Gordon, holding it close to his face as if hoping the pixelated image would turn into someone else. "This is Dad," he whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and defenseless. "But this says the delivery address is the receiving center on 4th Street. Why would he send things there because he didn't want me to see the billing address?" I said, my voice steady but quiet. "And that gala deposit, that is $10,000. Caleb. Charged to a card they opened by stealing my social security number." Caleb shook his head, a jerky, mechanical motion. No, they wouldn't go that far. They said they had investors. They said the community fund was backing the event because of the charity angle. The community fund is the victim. Caleb. "Not the backer." I said. "I tracked the money. They are cycling funds through the church to wash the debt." He dropped the paper. He looked sick. The confident businessman vanished, replaced by the little brother who used to hide behind me when our parents argued. "I didn't come here to ruin your day," I said, leaning in. "I didn't come here to burn the theater down while you are still inside. I came so you know what stage you are standing on. It is built on rot." Caleb covered his face with his hands. He took a long, shuddering breath. "They told me." His voice cracked. "They told me that we just needed to create the right image," Dad said. "Money follows the appearance of money." He said if I just looked successful, the contracts would come. I knew they were stretching it. I knew they didn't have the cash flow they pretended to have. But I looked away. I wanted to believe it. "I know," I said. "It is easier to believe the beautiful lie." "I am sorry, Mara," he said, looking up. His eyes were wet. "I let them treat you like an ATM because it kept the heat off me. We are past apologies." I said, "Now we are at the decision point. I am going to the gala. And when the bill comes due tonight, the real bill, I am going to expose them. I need to know where you stand. If you try to cover for them, if you try to lie to protect their image, you go down with them." Caleb looked at the folder, then back at me. He straightened his tie, but the motion was heavy, lacking his earlier swagger. "I will not cover for them," he said firmly. "But I have one condition. What I walk in with you," he said, "and when it happens, I stand next to you. I spent my whole life letting them push you out to the fringe so I could be in the spotlight. I am not going to abandon you again." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat that I refused to acknowledge. "Okay," I said. "We walk in together." "So the gala is still on?" he asked. "Oh, the gala is definitely on," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "Gordon and Lynn want a show. We are going to give them one. It just won't be the script they wrote." The ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was a suffocating masterclass in modern American excess. Under the massive crystal chandeliers, 500 of Chicago's self-proclaimed elite mingled, holding flutes of champagne that cost more than my first car. The air smelled of expensive perfume, hairspray, and the distinct metallic scent of ambition. It was a room where people did not look at you. They looked through you to see if there was someone more important standing behind your shoulder. My parents, Gordon and Lynn, were vibrating with the energy of the room. They moved through the crowd like sharks in a feeding frenzy, shaking hands and flashing teeth. They had positioned themselves near the main sponsor backdrop, ensuring they were in the background of every official photograph. Gordon had his arm draped around Caleb's shoulders, presenting him like a prize racehorse. I stood near a pillar on the edge of the room, wearing a simple black dress that I had owned for 5 years. I held a glass of sparkling water, watching my father hold court with a group of potential investors. Caleb is the future of this sector. Gordon boomed, his voice carrying over the low hum of jazz. He has the vision. We are just so proud, and your daughter, a woman in pearls, asked, glancing in my direction. Does she work with Caleb? Gordon gave a dismissive little wave. Oh, no. Mara is... She is very steady. She works in administration, paperwork, filing, that sort of thing. It is not glamorous, but someone has to do the boring work, right? He laughed. The group laughed with him. I took a sip of water. I did not flinch. I was used to being the punchline of his success story. Then, the atmosphere shifted. A woman walked into the room, flanked by 2 assistants. She wore a sharp white suit that cut through the sea of black tuxedos like a blade. It was Vivian Hale, the Chief Financial Officer of Northbridge Integrity Solutions, my boss. My parents did not know who she was, but the room did. Heads turned. Conversations dipped in volume. Northbridge was one of the primary sponsors of the evening, having funded the corporate integrity category of the awards. Vivian scanned the room, her eyes sharp and assessing. Her gaze swept past the local celebrities, past the desperate entrepreneurs, and landed squarely on me. She did not wave. She simply gave me a single, imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of respect from a woman who knew exactly what I did in the dark so that companies like hers could stay in the light. I nodded back. 10 minutes later, the lights dimmed and the host took the stage. After the usual pleasantries and sponsor thank yous, the mood turned serious. Tonight, the host said, his voice dropping to a register meant to convey gravity. We usually celebrate the loud victories, the mergers, the IPOs, the ribbon cuttings. But Northbridge Integrity Solutions has asked us to add a special recognition this year, a recognition for the work that happens in the shadows. Gordon was not listening. He was whispering something to Lynn, probably critiquing the centerpiece. We would like to honor a professional whose recent forensic work was instrumental in exposing a massive misappropriation of funds in a regional charity network. The host continued. A silent hero who proves that the truth is the most valuable currency we have. Please welcome to the stage, Mara Quinn. The name hung in the air for a second before the applause started. It was polite. Confused applause at first, then it grew louder as the recognition set in. At table 12, the world stopped. Gordon froze. His mouth was slightly open, a half-formed word dying on his lips. Lynn dropped her napkin. They stared at the stage. Then they turned their heads slowly, robotically, to look at where I had been standing. I set my glass down on a passing waiter's tray. I walked past them. I did not look at my father. I did not look at my mother. I walked with a straight spine, moving through the parted crowd. I stepped up to the podium. The spotlight was hot and blinding. Vivian Hale was waiting for me with a plaque. She handed it to me, leaning in close so only the microphone caught her whisper. Some people build houses of cards. Mara, she said, her voice amplified across the silent ballroom. And some people are the wind. Thank you for keeping us honest. I took the award. I did not smile. I did not give a speech thanking my loving family. I just stood there, letting the reality of my name and my title wash over the room. From the stage, I could see table 12 clearly. Gordon looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He was small. For the first time in his life, I saw him as he truly was, incredibly small. And next to him, Caleb was not looking at the stage. He was looking down at our parents, his expression unreadable, stripping away the hero worship he had held for them for 30 years. The script had been burned, and we were all improvising now. As the applause faded into the ambient hum of the ballroom, I stepped off the stage. I did not get 3 steps toward the exit before a hand clamped onto my upper arm. It was my mother. She pulled me sharply into the shadowed alcove of the service corridor, away from the main floor, but still visible to anyone looking for the restrooms. Her face was pale beneath her heavy makeup, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fury. "You did this on purpose," she hissed, her voice trembling. "You knew we were here. You knew what this night meant. Did you do this to take revenge on us, to make us look small?" I looked at her hand gripping my arm, then up at her face. My pulse was steady. "I did not do anything," I said calmly. "I just showed up. The only reason that scares you is because you know what you have been hiding." Lynn opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. She looked at me and realized, perhaps for the first time, that she had no leverage left. Before she could recover, my father stormed into the corridor. His face was flushed a dangerous shade of red, and he was not whispering. "Are you trying to humiliate me?" Gordon shouted, causing two waiters carrying trays of empty glasses to stop and stare. "I built a reputation in this town for 30 years, and you walk up there and act like some martyr, you ungrateful child. Lower your voice." "Gordon," Lynn pleaded, glancing nervously at the guests mingling nearby. "No," Gordon barked. "She thinks she is better than us because she pushes papers for a corporation. I am the one who put food on the table. I am the one who made this family what it is." He took a step toward me, his finger raised in accusation. But he never reached me. Caleb stepped between us. He moved with a speed I had never seen from him before, placing his hand firmly on our father's chest. "Dad, stop," Caleb said. His voice was not loud, but it was hard as stone. Gordon blinked, stunned by the physical barrier. "Excuse me. You are siding with her after everything I have done for you." "What have you done for me, Dad?" Caleb asked, looking Gordon in the eye. "You threw me a party I didn't ask for. You bought me a suit I can't afford. And now I need to know, what did you use Mara's name for?" Gordon faltered. He adjusted his tuxedo jacket, trying to regain his composure, shifting instantly from aggressor to victim. "It was just a loan," he said, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "We were a little short on cash flow this quarter. I just borrowed some credit capacity. Families help each other. It is what we do. I was going to pay it back next month." "It is not a loan when you steal the identity of the lender." I said. I pulled my phone from my clutch and held the screen up to his face. It displayed the email confirmation from the bank. "You opened 2 credit cards 6 months ago," I said, my voice cutting through his excuses. "You used Mom's maiden name as the security answer, and the billing address. You routed it to that mailbox rental so I would never see the statements." Lynn gasped. She reached for Gordon's sleeve, her face turning the color of ash. She knew that once the paper trail was visible, the game was over. "Mara, please," Lynn whispered. "We can fix this at home." "There is no fixing this," I said. Suddenly, a man in a headset walked briskly into the corridor. He wore the uniform of the hotel's event management staff. He held a tablet in his hand and looked stressed. He scanned our group and locked eyes with me. "Ms. Quinn?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I am sorry to interrupt," he said, looking uncomfortable as he glanced at my parents. "But we have a problem with the deposit for the ballroom. The $10,000 transaction that was processed this morning has just been flagged by the issuer as fraudulent. They are threatening to reverse the charge immediately." Gordon looked like he might vomit. The air left the corridor. The manager looked at the tablet, then at me. "Since the card is in your name, Ms. Quinn, I need you to verify the charge right now, or we will have to shut down the bar service." I looked at the manager. Then I looked at Gordon, who was staring at me with a desperate, silent plea in his eyes. He was begging me to save him one last time. He was begging me to pick up the bill. "I will be happy to cooperate with your legal team regarding the fraud," I said to the manager, my voice polite and icy. "However, I am not the person who executed that transaction. I did not authorize it. You should speak to the gentleman who provided the card numbers. I gestured to Gordon. The manager turned his gaze to my father. Sir Gordon looked around. He saw the waiters watching. He saw guests peering around the corner. He saw Caleb staring at him with absolute disappointment. The stage he had built had collapsed, and there was no one left to applaud. He did not answer. He grabbed Lynn's arm with a desperate grip. "We are leaving," Gordon muttered. He dragged my mother away, moving fast, his head down, retreating from the scene of his own disaster. But it was too late. As they pushed through the doors toward the valet, I saw the heads turn. The whispers started. They were leaving, but their reputation was staying right here, dead on the floor. The drive to Fairhaven took 2 hours, and neither Caleb nor I turned on the radio. The silence between us was heavy, but it was a shared weight, a concrete agreement that we were no longer playing by the old rules. We pulled into the driveway of the house where we grew up. The lawn was perfectly manicured, the hedges trimmed to geometric precision. It was a beautiful wrapper for a rotting gift. When we walked in, my parents were waiting in the living room. They had set the stage for a disciplinary hearing. Gordon sat in his high-backed leather armchair, and Lynn was perched nervously on the edge of the sofa. They expected me to be alone. They expected me to be scared. When they saw Caleb standing shoulder to shoulder with me, the air shifted. Gordon's eyes narrowed, but he decided to stick to his script. "Sit down," Gordon said, pointing to the stiff wooden chair in the corner. I did not sit. I placed my bag on the coffee table and took out the file folder. "We are not here to sit." "Dad," I said. "We are here to settle the ledger." Gordon's face reddened. He leaned forward, gripping the armrests of his chair until his knuckles turned white. "I raised you," he spat out. "I fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. And this is how you repay me, by humiliating us, by acting like a victim because we needed a little help. Raising me is not a license to use my identity," I said, my voice flat. Parenthood does not come with a line of credit in my name. Lynn let out a sob. It was a wet, ragged sound. She buried her face in her hands. "We just wanted the family to look stable," she cried. "Everyone looks at us. The neighbors, the church. They all think we are doing so well. We couldn't let them know we were drowning. We just needed to keep up appearances until Caleb made it big." I looked at her, and for the first time, I did not see a mother. I saw an addict. They were not just greedy, they were addicted to admiration. They needed the envy of strangers like they needed oxygen, and they were willing to burn their own children to keep the fire going. Caleb stepped forward. He looked down at our mother. "The gala," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Where did the money come from?" "Mom." "Really?" Gordon looked away, staring stubbornly at the wall. Lynn wiped her eyes, her mascara smearing across her cheek. "We opened a few cards," she whispered. Just a few times, under Mara's name. We were going to pay it back, but the interest rates were so high, and then the charity fund needed a donation to keep Dad on the board, and we lost track." "You didn't lose track," I said. "You committed a felony." I opened the folder. "Here is the reality," I said. "I have drafted 2 documents. The first is a confession to the bank, admitting that you opened these accounts without my permission. You will sign a repayment plan, and you will agree to never use my personal information again. If you do this, I will not press criminal charges." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "What is the other option?" Gordon growled. "The other option is that I walk out of here and drive straight to the precinct." I said, "I file a formal report for identity theft and credit fraud. I hand over the surveillance footage of you picking up the packages. You go to jail." Gordon stood up so fast his chair slammed against the wall. He slammed his hand onto the coffee table, making the porcelain figurines rattle. "You would send your own father to prison," he shouted. "If you do that, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? I will cut you out of this family forever." I looked at him. I looked at the vein throbbing in his forehead, the desperation in his eyes. I felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no guilt, just a profound sense of closure. "You cut me out years ago, Dad," I said. "You cut me out the moment you decided I wasn't a daughter, but just a story you could edit to make yourself look better." I picked up the folder and turned to the door. "You have until 5 o'clock to decide," I said. Gordon stood there, panting, his chest heaving. He looked at the clock on the mantelpiece. It was already afternoon. "You can't do this," he said, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper. "Tonight is the quarterly meeting for the church charity fund. I am the keynote speaker. I have to present the financial health of the community." I stopped at the door. I looked back at him one last time. "Then I guess you better decide which version of the truth you are going to tell them," I said, "because the truth is coming out, one way or another." The parish hall in Fairhaven smelled of lemon floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that had not changed since I was a child. The room was packed to capacity. Every folding chair was occupied by a neighbor, a donor, or a member of the church board. At the front of the room, standing on the raised wooden stage, was my father. Gordon stood behind the podium with his chest puffed out, radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from a lifetime of believing your own press releases. I sat in the very last row, near the exit. Caleb sat next to me. He did not slouch. He did not look at his phone. He sat with his spine pressed against the metal chair, his eyes fixed on the man who had spent 30 years directing our lives. Generosity is not just about giving. Gordon boomed into the microphone, his voice practiced and smooth. It is about trust. It is about knowing that your hard-earned money is building a legacy for this community. When you give to this fund, you are giving to a future we build together. He smiled, that winning, charismatic smile that had charmed investors and bank managers for decades. He opened his arms to the room. "So tonight, I am asking you to dig deep," he said. The double doors at the back of the hall opened. It was not a dramatic slam. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of inevitability. A man in a gray suit stepped in, followed by a woman holding a briefcase. I recognized the woman. She was the fraud investigator from the bank, the one I had authorized to act on my behalf. They walked down the center aisle. The sound of their shoes clicking on the linoleum floor cut through the silence. Gordon stopped speaking. He squinted against the stage lights. "Excuse me," Gordon said, forcing a chuckle. "We are in the middle of a meeting here." The man in the gray suit did not stop until he reached the front row. He looked up at the stage, his expression devoid of emotion. "Mr. Gordon Quinn?" the man asked. "Yes," Gordon said, his smile faltering. "Who are you?" "I am a senior investigator with the fraud division," the man said, his voice loud enough to carry to the back of the room without a microphone. "I need to speak with you regarding a series of unauthorized accounts opened in the name of Mara Quinn, and the subsequent laundering of funds through the Fairhaven Grace Community Fund." A gasp rippled through the room. It started in the front row and moved backward like a wave. Gordon gripped the podium. This is a misunderstanding. A family matter. We can discuss this in private." "I am afraid the time for private discussion has passed," the investigator said, opening a file. "We have confirmed records of credit fraud totaling over $50,000, with billing statements routed to a private mailbox to conceal the activity. We also have a trace on the $7,500 donation made to this fund last week. It was flagged as proceeds from identity theft." Lynn, who was sitting in the front row, let out a sharp cry. She stood up, trembling, trying to block the view of the board members behind her. "Please," she sobbed. "He didn't mean to. We were just borrowing it. We are good people." A board member stood up. He was a man who had known my father for 20 years. His face was hard. "Gordon," the board member said, "is this true? Did you put stolen money into the church accounts?" Gordon looked around the room. He saw the doubt spreading like a virus. He saw the admiration turning into disgust. He needed a villain, and he needed one fast. He spun around, scanning the back of the room until his eyes locked on me. "You," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger. "You did this. You are trying to ruin me because you are jealous. After everything I did for you, I stood up. I did not rush." I smoothed the front of my dress and looked him in the eye across the sea of turning heads. "I have been silent long enough for you to use that silence as a tool," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I am not ruining you, Dad. I am just handing you the bill." Gordon looked at Caleb, desperate for an ally. "Caleb, tell them your sister is lying." Caleb stood up. He looked at the father who had tried to build a monument to him out of stolen bricks. "I am not going to lie for you anymore," Caleb said. His voice cracked, then firmed up. "I do not want my career to be sponsored by fraud. I will cooperate with the investigation to make sure everything is clarified." Gordon reeled back as if he had been physically struck. The room was buzzing now, a hive of whispers and judgment. I walked to the end of the aisle. I looked at the board members, then at my parents. "I have provided all the evidence to the authorities," I said to the room. "I will assist in the legal process to ensure the debts are assigned to the correct people. But I will not pay them, and I will not take the blame for them." Gordon stood alone on the stage. The spotlight was still on him, but it no longer made him look like a leader. It just made him look exposed. He opened his mouth to spin another story, to tell another lie, but he looked at the faces in the crowd and realized that the currency he had traded in for so long, his reputation was finally bankrupt. I turned and pushed open the heavy doors. Caleb followed me. We stepped out into the cool night air of the parking lot. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the bill. I was free. Thanks so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you guys are tuning in from. So drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. If you enjoyed watching justice get served, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories for more real-life drama, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Catch you in the next one.